something invited itself into my friend's home. This haunting experience really freaked me out. When I was younger, I had a next-door neighbor named Lexi, and she was my best friend. Our parents would go on trips on motorcycles with each other, and we would camp out at one of our houses until they came back. It was normal for us. We never had any paranormal events prior to this specific night. We were sitting in bedroom talking and doing what we normally did. We saw a bright light through her window, followed with the sound of motorcycles pulling onto the gravel driveway. We instantly think, okay, our parents forgot something, but before we could even get up to leave the bedroom, we heard a knocks and a soft woman's voice said hello. The front door opened. This was a familiar sound because the door scraped against the hardwood flooring. We panicked, thinking there was an intruder at this point because this woman didn't sound like our family. We have very Texan voices. We scouted the house, scared out of our minds, just to find the front door wide open and nobody in the driveway. Nobody was in the house. We finally felt better. We walked back into her bedroom, but before she went to enter, she collapsed onto the floor and started sobbing. I didn't know what was happening. I was scared, and she told me something as tall as the door frame was standing in her parents' room. After our parents returned, her family continued to have paranormal activity in their house. They moved out too. When I was still relatively newly married, my husband and I moved into a townhouse-style apartment. The 2 floors of our apartment were on the 2nd and 3rd floors of the building, and the management office and mailbox area was almost directly below us on the ground level. The woman who managed the building was older, didn't care for the property well, and usually spent most days chain-smoking Camel non-filters in her office. And being a hateful old racist. Imagine renting a place from Juno the social worker from Beetlejuice, but less helpful. So after kiddo was born, just busy keeping the house clean and the baby. After lunch, the kiddo needed a bath, so I went upstairs and ran the tub. Soon, I had the baby sitting happily splashing in one of those suction cup bath seats. It's the middle of winter and we had no heat, an issue I'd been fighting the landlord about for a while. We basically had to keep a space heater, or 2, in every room to keep the chill off. I had taken one of the space heaters in the bathroom to keep the bathroom warm enough for bath time, and had it sitting out of reach on top of the bathroom counter. I was standing in the bathtub, getting ready to lift the baby out, when all of a sudden, the space heater started to rock back and forth, when it had not been rocking before. I had this horrible feeling of dread as I looked at the heater, and I just reacted because I knew I couldn't get both of us out of the tub in time. I reached down to grab the baby seat, ending up dropping the baby over the side of the tub to the bathroom floor. Heater thumped into the shower door, bounced off the edge of the tub and landed on its side on the floor a couple inches away, where it shut off. When I looked over to the corner of the bathroom, that part of the room seemed to just get darker, like it was filling up with shadows. There was no smoke, no change in lighting, no windows, so no sun going behind a cloud, etc. It was just darker. I also started to smell cigarette smoke. Camel non-filters. The smell was so thick it made me cough and my chest ached, but I couldn't see any smoke haze. And I felt this overwhelming sensation of hatred and malice, like someone was standing there giving me a death glare. I grabbed the baby and a towel and ran downstairs. I was so freaked out, I couldn't bring myself to go back up there, so I used some diapers from the diaper bag and kept the baby wrapped in the towel and cuddled up to stay warm. I stayed down there the entire rest of the day until my husband got home. Every so often, I'd look up the stairs at the bathroom, but I didn't want to take the baby up there, and I was afraid to leave him alone downstairs. He went up to check, figuring it was yet another maintenance issue. There was no electrical issues, no damage to the outlet, no smoke, no cigarette smell. He put the heater back on the counter and turned it on, watched it for a few minutes, and it didn't rock, so it didn't rock itself off the counter earlier. He laughed it off, but later that day we heard Juno's adult son downstairs near the mailboxes yelling his head off at people. And that's when we found out she'd had a massive heart attack in her office earlier that day, and he'd found her dead in her chair, with a Camel non-filtered still in her hand. Before I was born, my entire family and extended family, uncles/aunts/cousins, etc., all went to the beach one day for a picnic in Pakistan. Now, I don't know the exact details, however, back in the day, The smugglers used to bring in electronics from various countries to resell them via boats, and they would park the boats at the beach. Now, from what I have always been told, they used to dig holes or something similar during low tides. That'd help keep the boat steady on that spot as they unloaded. However, once completed, they'd leave, leaving that hole in the ground. So back to the picnic. As everyone arrives, 20+ people, the kids get out of the cars and run straight to the ocean, and as they enter they start getting sucked into that hole, one after another. Screams ensue and everyone is trying to save each other, and one after another they keep going in. Eventually, 14 members of my family drowned and died there in a matter of minutes. It was an absolute catastrophe and extremely tragic. However, the haunting paranormal part of it comes next. Everyone used to live in a massive house all together. So now imagine all of a sudden 14 people gone, dead. It became extremely depressing and empty, that place. One of the floors was completely closed off as the entire family living there had died. After a few years, it became extremely common and frequent to hear kids playing on that floor, or you'd hear every other night footsteps of someone walking in, putting on slippers and going up the stairs. You could stand there and hear it clear as daylight. I recall a very clear incident. My mom was in the kitchen and I was sitting in the swing facing the mirror, as I see two kids peek out of one of the rooms and then run to the adjacent room. I asked my mom if we have guests over and she said no, no one is over. I explained why I asked. She pulled me into the kitchen and explained that day that it's common to see the kids, however not to engage them or go towards them, and to mind my own business. It became extremely common for us to spot these things as we lived there, but no harm was done. Once my tutor came home, sitting in my room, and I'd always close the door to my room so there are no distractions. Once he came about and he was sitting facing the door, which I had left open as I was alone at home. He mentioned to me midway if I could close the door, as my family was walking around and it was a bit distracting. I told him no one is home, which he didn't believe, until I took him out and showed him around the whole floor. He absolutely freaked out and immediately left and stopped tutoring me unless I went to his place. I moved to Saudi Arabia after that and saw a lot of things growing up, but thankfully I am not scared of such things or experiences. About 10 years ago, I had an almost year-long battle with sleep paralysis. I'd wake up every night and just see anywhere from 1 to 6 shadow people surrounding my bed just looking at me. Every single night. All I could feel was just absolute dread and there was no way out. Auditory hallucinations can also happen during, and I'd be awakened by a deep, almost multitonal sounding voice saying hatred with increasing volume, ramping all the way up to a scream right in my ear. They were even showing up in my dreams, and I remember sitting in my living room, in dream, and our speaker system I could start to hear the voice come through it. Only for it to say, "I'm coming," and then loud-ass footsteps running up my stairs, and a shadow bursting through the door. It was just all so elaborate and fucked up that I was starting to think I was going insane. Once I moved out it finally stopped, but I still think about it a lot. I used to work in a nursing home and quite honestly that's where the most paranormal activity happens. One day I was rushing back and forth to help my coworkers that in the corner of my eye I noticed a man dressed in a blue suit sitting and watching me run back and forth. From his style of hair and clothes maybe someone from the 1940s or 50s, but the creepiest one was when we were serving breakfast and I noticed a little boy standing and he had a lollipop in his hand, looked like he was giggling although I couldn't hear it. A lot of my coworkers had similar experience about how they'll see a woman in a yellow or white dress walking around or how you'll often see shadows walking around or peeking out. When I first moved out of my parents' house, I lived in an old but recently renovated annex building on a farm. I was the first person to live in this building. It was really old and looked like it could have been an old pig shed. Weird stuff happened pretty much from the day I moved in. Orbs and photos, unexplained thumps and bangs, all the usual ghost stuff. The annex was really small, tiny shower room/toilet, then a tiny kitchen, then a living room and then a bedroom. Each room had its own door. One day I was in the shower and when I got out and went through to the kitchen all the cupboards were open. Twice I had opened a kitchen cupboard and had a glass and a mug fly out, as in literally fly out and hit the wall behind me. If I ever fell asleep on the sofa in the living room, I would be woken up by a man's voice angrily shouting hello at me. My TV would turn on in the night, my phone would randomly start playing music for no reason. I had my best friend stay over one day after we had been out drinking. We were both hungover and she went to bed in my bedroom while I was zonked out on the sofa. She's shouting at me to stop walking around, why can't you sit down, and I was sitting down. I couldn't hear the footsteps but she definitely could. I would also lose things in my bedroom all the time. Jewelry, makeup, etc. A new lady started coming at my workplace and little did I know she's a bit psychic. I had never spoken to her about where I live or that weird stuff happened in my house all the time. One day, totally out of the blue, she told me there's a woman who likes to come to my house and play and she really likes the teddy on my bedside table. Honest to God, there is no way she could have known this. She went on to say the woman is from a long time ago and the monks used to look after her. At this point my mind was totally and utterly blown. She told me to buy her a teddy and put it next to my one only bedside table. I was skeptical but willing to give anything a go because I hated living there so much. I was so scared and freaked out so often. So I did. And everything stopped.